Okay. In one of the earlier lessons, we used a colon to separate two related independent clauses if one was claim and the other one was an evidence. I believe that was rule number 6. But colons can also be used to lead into a list. Unfortunately, on the SAT, they purposely use colons in places they should not, leading into a list, or they lead into a list and there should have been a colon. And if you don't know this rule, those are points that are left on the table for you. So what we're going to try to do is go, well, when should we and should we not use a colon? Let's actually talk specifically about when we should. In the example below, we have, actually, I'll read the rule first. Use a colon to lead into a list if you use a category that labels the list. In the example, this colon is used correctly. It says Mr. Bailey does these activities. And notice there's a hard stop there, which is why the colon is appropriate. But right in front of the colon, that's the label for what the list is. If you get to a colon, you should be able to look at one side of the colon and see a list of things. And on the other side of the colon, you should see the label of the list of things. So Mr. Bailey does these activities: weightlifting, running, basketball, and playing musical instruments. And what you probably notice is this list matches that they're activities. So that is when you should and can use a colon to lead into a list, is when there is a label there. So you know that what's going to follow is a list of those activities. Mr. Bailey uses the following tools: colon, screwdriver, wrench, hammer. You see the point, like tools is what the example was. You cannot, however, go Mr. Bailey does weightlifting, running, basketball, and playing musical instruments and use a colon. At that point, that's inappropriate because there's no label there leading into it. So what I'm gonna have you do, for example, too, is make your own list. I'll write my own too because I like to do that kind of stuff. So one of the other things too that is part of the strange parts of this rule is that actually the list can be one item long. It doesn't have to be like a list of 3 or more. It can just be one item long. Um, but I feel like using a colon leading into a list sometimes is a really good way to go. And sometimes on the SAT, they purposely misuse it, hoping that you don't know the rule, and thus you pick the wrong answer, like no change, or the change needed is the wrong change needed. So that is rule 9. You can use a colon to lead into a list if you have a category that labels the list in front of the colon.